Hi, hi.
Hello, how's it going?
Good. Let me turn off my AC so that we have better audio. What's been going on?
Nothing. I really thought while I was reading this week that I was going to finish the book, but I think I have about 30 minutes left. So I'm kind of like, I don't even know, not ready for this book to end.
I know, right? So like what was the big I feel like it doesn't matter where we start and stop because at first we were kind of trying to like coordinate where we started and stopped reading, but since I had already read it before and now, I'm just going like, okay, just read until you feel like it.
Right.
And I feel like every time you what was it? I feel like every time you read a new section, like what's its face? Yeah, you always find some sort of big new reveal and we're always like, ah! So like this book is just a constant, like there's no lulls.
No,
Yeah.
no, it works with, I think, in every single way, it keeps you on your toes.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, what stuck out to you the most this section?
Hmm. I think I was just under the impression that I was close to the end because it feels like she's reflecting a lot in these last, I think I read like 3 chapters or 3 sections. And
Mhm.
in each section, she's reflecting. And so I was like, oh, I must be close to the end because of all this reflection. But I think one thing that stuck out to me was just talking about how meeting other adoptees helped her feel not alone and how she also connected with people who aren't necessarily adopted, but whose parents weren't in their lives. Like one parent wasn't in their life, or there was another group that she really connected with that weren't necessarily adoptees. And that just made me think about just how versatile the story is. I think you don't only connect to it. Of course, it's incredible that this is written by someone who was adopted and this is that perspective. So I can understand how you would connect in that way. But I also saw some parallels in like what I've experienced from her story. So I'm really glad that she pointed that out.
Yeah, that's definitely like I what I just was rereading before we got on, and I reread the part where she was talking about how like Cindy grew up the first 5 years in Korea and didn't know her mom before she came over, and then whenever she came over, like Cindy was conveying to her like, this is my mom. I don't really recognize this person. Like I feel I don't like I definitely as an adoptee have sometimes been like, huh, that's my parent. Okay.
Yeah.
But like I feel like that can be a universal feeling when it's just kind of like a meta thought that is universal that we all have when we're like, huh, okay, that's my parent. Like this is the person that's raising me. All right. Like I definitely get it whenever my dad's a pastor, so whenever he's doing like a wedding or something and he's like up on stage and I'm just kind of like sitting there listening and I'm just like, that's my dad.
It's certainly something when you're looking at someone and you
Mhm.
have to remind yourself that that is a relative.
Mhm. I think it's like seeing family out of the context of family,
Yeah.
like seeing them at their day job.
Yeah. It's like seeing a teacher at the store. It's a
Mm.
little less weird, I think, when you're in college, but I remember seeing like teachers high school and under outside of school. I'm like, what are they doing here?
Like I was friends with a lot of my teachers' kids,
Okay.
so like I would go over to their house like for like play dates and stuff and I would just be like so bizarre.
Yes, seeing people not in the context. I feel like even drowning this out a little more, if I see my friends who are like, I have similar friends with someone, just it's so weird to me that they're friends with other people. It's like, how do you know each other? If I have one friend from maybe high school, one friend from college, and they already know each other, that freaks me out a little bit.
Yeah. Also, like, if you, one thing that definitely freaked me out is I met a girl during school that was a triplet.
Oh.
And two of them went to Columbia and the other one went to Cornell. So I saw her on campus and I thought it was her, but it wasn't. And then I saw her later and she was like, yeah, no, I'm a triplet. And I was just like, what?
Yes, that would also throw me off too.
Like, I don't think of people in the context of having siblings. Like, whenever we talked about siblings a lot last week, but like, whenever I just meet a singular person, like, I'm just like, huh, it's just them.
Right.
I don't think of them in relation to like family members or siblings or things like that. Like, I think about like my parents having brothers and sisters, like my aunts and uncles, but I found out my grandma was a twin when I was like 10, and I was just like, okay,
right,
weird. I can't imagine my grandma being like a twin and young and like,
yeah, literally just knowing her in the context of your grandmother. Any life before that is like,
nope. Like, I don't recognize a woman who didn't take me to Luby's.
I can understand that.
So I think it's a very universal thing, especially since Cindy is the biological daughter that stayed with her biological family, for her to have that kind of not out of body experience, but kind of a meta experience.
Yeah.
And like, I see like Nicole sharing her thoughts about that a lot, like being like, okay, these two people are my parents, or my bio parents, but are complete strangers to me. And I feel like I would have a very similar reaction, because I started recently looking for my bio parents. I haven't really put too much effort into it, but I've like put out some feelers and things like that. But like, if I were to meet them now as an adult, like Nicole did, they're just two other people.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, we've talked about parents too, just in terms of how like there are some things that you expect them to know because they're your parents, but I mean, obviously your situation is different, so navigating through that.
It's another, like how you mentioned how you expect people to know things because they're your parents. It's like, at what point do we get to that age where, oh, parents don't know everything? Like, whenever they stopped being able to help you with your homework and you're like, you're not the smartest person ever. You can't do 10th grade geometry. Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm watching my older cousin's parent now, and I mean, you know, my parents weren't perfect either, and just understanding that parents are people too. They make mistakes too. Just because they have a kid doesn't it doesn't mean they're going to get disciplining right. It doesn't mean that like their emotions are always going to stay intact.
And like, what is the thing? I feel like, especially like growing up, and now that we are at that age where, I don't know about you, but I also have friends that are parents now, and I'm like, what? But just like, what is that I feel like it's a very inherent thing that people compare parents. You can't compare any pair of parents to anything. Like, in the adoptee world, I know that there's always going to be a comparison between bio parents and adoptive parents, because that's just the automatic comparison that people would draw. But like I feel like comparing just parents in general, always like measuring them, like, well, so and so's parents let them stay up till like 10 o'clock to watch TV. Mom, dad.
Yeah, it feels intuitive if you have two sets of parents to compare, but I mean, people are different, so they're going to parent differently, and arguably one's not going to be better than the other.
Yeah. I feel like kids shouldn't feel like this either, but like they like sometimes kids can feel like their parents compare them to other kids too. But at the same time, we turn that around and we compare our parents.
Mm-hmm.
Like even if you have a relationship with both of your parents, like you can even compare them to each other.
Definitely.
If they're not co-parenting, but if they are and they're all in the same household, it's also very easy to like be like, hey, asking one parent, hey, can I go and hang out with my friends or something, and they say no, and then you just like don't tell the other parent, just go up to them and be like, hey. And see if you can get kind of a half answer.
Mm-hmm. It's like, but this parent said yes, so that's a yes, right?
Plausible deniability.
No, my brother and I definitely got in trouble for that as younger kids.
Like I feel like it's that kind of a thing that I will not be able to fully understand until I do become a parent, if and when that might happen. And so like as a non-parent right now, it's very hard for me to like kind of, okay, I'm gonna sound so mean, but it's hard for me to empathize. I'm sorry, it's really hard for me to empathize with parents too. I give them a very hard time.
Empathize about what?
Just being compared. Because
Okay.
I feel like as human beings, we're always being compared because that's very human nature. But like, especially on moms.
Yeah.
Moms are constantly judged.
Yeah. I think the comparison is fair, I think. Of course, like if you have a kid, they're going to lean more towards a lenient parent. But as a parent, again, I don't have kids, so this is me just like theorizing. But as a parent, you know you're doing what's best for your kid. So even if someone compares you to maybe their friend's more lenient parent, you still have the upper hand.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one thing if you're comparing, and in that comparison, something is wrong that needs to be addressed that you just need to improve upon. But if you're doing the right thing, like the comparisons are gonna come, they're gonna happen. It's just, at least I would try and just take a breath, take a step back, and remember, I'm doing this for you. Like, you will be fine.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the times parents also forget that kids are pretty resilient. They can bounce back from a lot of things. Like I ran face first into a brick wall whenever I was little, and I turned out somewhat okay. Well, 10 years later, my dog also ran into that same brick wall and started having a seizure. So he's fine, but like,
oh my,
that brick wall. But like, yeah, kids are pretty resilient. So like, whenever people talk about like, oh, what kind of like, whenever they argue about like different types of disciplining, like taking away like a toy, a cell phone or something, or like making them do chores, or I don't know, things like that. Like this might also sound like a crazy low standard, but as long as the kid's not like a serial killer,
then you've done a good job.
you've done a decent job, as long as they're like contributing to society and not murdering people.
It's just such an interesting time to parent, because like even my cousins are different from how we were growing up. They're so much more confident, so much more outspoken. And so just looking at how their opinion is heard so much more than even like mine growing up. Parents have a tough job in today's society. I don't think parenting was ever an easy job, but it's a very unique challenge, I think, in today's society.
Yeah, and it's expensive.
Yes.
Like kids, human life is more valuable like than things, but I also like things.
Think about all the things you could do with that money.
Think of all the plants I can buy. No, like,
yeah, kids are expensive.
Yeah, which that reminds me actually of something, like, I don't know if Nicole mentions it in her book, but a question that adoptees get a lot is, how much did you cost?
People ask the kids that?
Oh yeah. So like whenever like we're talking about like there is unquantifiable worth in human life, like I can tell you right now, my parents paid $30,000 in the 90s just for my adoption fees. That is just a fact that a lot of adoptees know from a very young age.
Yeah.
It's also a very dangerous fact because, like, in arguments, not by my parents, but in other contexts, like, it has been thrown in my face. So like,
wow,
if you're a kid and that's a very dangerous fact that can be thrown at you, like, and you don't know how to respond, and kids are just little balls of energy and emotions and don't know how to like communicate any of that, so they'll just blurt out whatever. Like, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, that brings me to where she was explaining adoption to her oldest daughter, and she explained that like she had biological parents, someone else had to help them raise her. And so her daughter, meaning well, goes, "Oh, I bet you like your first mom better because we like you better." And like, just not knowing the weight of saying that, because I don't know how old she was at that point, but just not old enough to understand. And so I think in that case, that's somebody who didn't understand like how much of it, how much that weighed, how big of something that was to just throw on someone's face in an argument.
Yeah. And like, also just, I don't know how to even say this now. I've seen articles where they, for adoption agencies, they actually price the cost of an adoption based on race too.
That was the first thing I thought about when you said,
yeah,
how it could be a problem.
Yeah. Like, costs on race, costs based on like ableism, things where literally if you have anything quote unquote wrong with you, you might, like, your cost might differ, quote unquote. Like, it's just I do not know how systems like an adoption system can come to such conclusions, like pricing kids.
Yeah.
It's not great. I don't know how the system started. I'm pretty sure if I looked it up, I would not be happy.
Just everything about it feels wrong.
And yet that is the reality in which we are living.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and like the same goes for like the foster care system too. Like, there are different fees and rates that foster parents are paid based on different children's circumstances. So that is also something that's just like, and it's state sanctioned too.
Wow.
So it's paid by taxes.
Mm-hmm.
At
Yeah,
least,
we're paying for that.
yeah.
Mm-mm. What do you think the next step is? This is clearly a problem.
Like if you took money out of the adoption industry, I am very curious as to what would happen. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Not to mention, there's also like so many different things coming into play too, because there have been like human trafficking rings that have been busted about it. There's been like falsifying documents, and I'm just speaking about international adoption. I don't even know about domestic adoption, honestly, much.
Right.
But like as far as international adoption goes, like a large percentage of international quote unquote orphans actually have living family. And like there's coercion, there's like a misunderstanding, because legal adoption is a very westernized concept. Like say like someone that is recruiting like vulnerable people to be like, hey, your kid will have a good opportunity in the US for school, for getting all their needs fulfilled. And if you're in a vulnerable position, and you don't know what you're signing,
right,
there's a lot of ethical and moral gray that goes into the international adoption. Not even community, industry, for sure.
Yeah.
So going back to the original thing that I said, like whenever kids are like, how much did you cost? Like that is such a loaded thing to ask maybe a like 8 or 9-year-old.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know any of the other junk back then. I just thought, oh, you just pay a fee, like a car.
Right.
You're getting a car.
Youth.
Humans are not cars, people.
Oh man.
But so like it's interesting that whenever you put like birth parents back into play later in life, I was reading that part where Nicole would ask her dad questions and somehow it would always come back to the adoption. And like I can't even imagine confronting like my birth parents being like, so what was it like for you choosing to give a baby up? like forget all the other stuff, like what's our family heritage or whatever. Like it's
yeah, and both of her parents answer that question so differently, so how do you even process that?
Yeah, it's something that I feel is just so unnatural, you know, because like adoption is a trauma and adoption is not the quote unquote natural way of things. And it's just such a complicated and nuanced situation.
Yeah.
Like oh my god. What are your thoughts now that I thought I had told you about whenever I was a kid getting asked how much I cost?
No. That's crazy. I mean, I don't think there was a time in my life I would have asked that to another human. Crazy.
Yeah, I like, you don't ask people how much they cost. That's not a thing. like commodifying human beings. Like, obviously there's been a long drawn out history of commodifying human beings, and not just in adoption, but like with the slave trade, and with what was that thing that the king of Belgium did in Africa? He was like literally hunting humans. He was like paying to hunt humans, I think. Yeah. It was like in the like 1800s too, so only like 100 years ago, 200 years ago.
My goodness.
I'm bad at math. But like, human beings have been able to commit very bad atrocities against other human beings, and you just wonder.
Yeah, the history is quite ugly. That's why I just think it's so important that we look at it and actually study it, so that way we can learn from it. Because as we talked about last week, history is absolutely repeating itself, and now it might not get to the extent that it has been, but it's not looking great right now.
Nope. Yeah, like, what do we know though? We're just two girls with a podcast. It's fine.
And math is not our thing. But we are scientists.
We are scientists. We have our master's degrees. Someone was dumb enough to give us that.
It's so I think one of the big takeaways, even though we are not wrapping up this book, is definitely how complicated adoption is, and you can't simplify it to good or bad. There's so much to talk about when we're talking about adoption, and I think that's definitely universal. There are so many things we think of as good or bad. We don't know the whole context of the situation. It's a lot more complicated than it may seem.
Exactly. Well, it is about time, I guess, for us to wrap up. How are you feeling after all of that heavy conversation that I just laid on you?
I will say, because it's daylight, we both have a lot more energy. But I mean, we typically don't go in the direction that I maybe even think we'll go. But I'm really interested with how it was interesting how this went, like what this conversation brought up. What about you?
Like, it's interesting because like for me, because things like, especially now that I'm a little more immersed in the adoption community than I was growing up in the and during my adolescence, I think it's very like I said, it's a common thing for adoptees to be asked, how much did you cost? And for like someone who like is not adopted, like explaining that and that experience, I haven't actually had to slow down and explain that experience, because whenever that is brought up, it's usually amongst other adoptees. So that was a interesting time and a fun little exercise for me. But yeah. So my big takeaway is also, if you parent a kid right, they will not turn into a serial killer.
Oh, parenting.
Yep.
What a conversation.
What a time. What a time. But we're probably finishing this book next week, so
yes,
we get to pick another one.
I think we're doing Uncomfortable Conversations.
Yeah, we are.
Emmanuel Acho.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, that's gonna be a good one too. But it will be sad to say goodbye to this book next week.
Yeah, it'll be interesting also because I'm not a sports person. So I will be constantly calling you for questions.
Yeah, I haven't looked at the back. I don't know a ton about this book, but if there are a lot of sports,
yeah,
if there are a lot of sports facts, then I feel like that's definitely going to draw me in.
Yeah. See, after that book, we should find something about decolonizing and making the plant world less racist.
And that would be your wheelhouse.
If it was about plants, I'd be.
If it was about plants.
If it was about plants. I don't know how plants can be racist though, but I'm sure the industry in some way, shape, or form is and will be. So, but on that note,
on that happy note,
thank you so much for being here and unpacking that with me.
Yes, thank you for having me.
I will see you next time.
All right.
Wow.